Singing and the taste from love rocking me. She left out on the cold shade, shot through the six. I'd be the day to remember. Niggas say trick and they never still make the west. That's the mistake. Holes are talking to me. It's just like it's.
Okay. So any question about your assignment one? I extended it to what did I do? One question on assignment one. 1% assignment. So I said June 6th, which is what? Saturday, I guess? Friday?
Friday.
Okay. Making progress? Any question on it? Nobody has started yet? Anyway, so we're gonna move on here.
I don't need nobody.
Okay, so we're moving on here to guys, please. Restart. Honestly, she stopped. Okay, so let's take a look here. So we're moving on to, so we've kind of finished, as we said, with security, everything is in layers. By now, hopefully everybody's an expert in how to, one of the barriers being limiting the IP addresses through security groups and so on. There's other things, even when we log in, so far we know, let's say you log in, you might restrict your IP addresses, so security group or NACL or other ways, and firewalls essentially. The other thing to remember though, sometimes you have a database here, and then here you are as a user. Usually, as I said, these days, you log in remotely. Well, how do I know that this database is trustworthy? As in, maybe I am, my IP is authorized, I try to log in. How do I know this database is actually a database? What I mean is, how do I know somebody didn't they could set my traffic and pretend to be the database? So that's another type of barrier, or another type of security we can add. Some kind of handshaking for public private key cryptography, which we'll see later. But for now, we're going to move on, assuming that we have access to the database, we decide the database. How we can connect to the database, how do we control access to the tables and the schemas and stuff. Now, you've all done a few courses in databases, right? Supposedly. So it really is not about table creation, it's just about the security of those. So let's take a look. So in this area, you'll notice that there is a concept called roles and privileges. So roles and privileges is now accepted as the best way to deal with access to your the database objects. So we use the word object just so that's clear. We use the word object. What does an object mean? So in a database, what do we have in a database? What do we have on a database? Tables, right? Anything else? Right? Yeah, the data on the tables, yes, let's see the tables. Database, right? Because anything else? Maybe you talk about schemas in your other courses. These are kind of like categorizing a bunch of tables. Subcategory of database, if you think about it. What else? Maybe functions, triggers, stuff like this. So there's a bunch of things. So the terminology here we use is an object, right? It's not necessarily. So you cannot get access or control access to all of these. You can access on the database level, at the schema level, at the functions, triggers, all of them. So it's not just tables, although you can consider think about it like that, but it's just not tables. So anyways, as we'll see, every database kind of plays this roles and privileges kind of concept. So basically, we'll see what that means. We're going to look at it from a Postgres. You'll see that the concept is the same across all databases, but the architecture is different. So what does that mean? I mean, okay, when you think about it, how would if you're a user in a database, how can I control your access, right? Maybe you're the manager, okay, you should know everything, you should get access to everything. Well, maybe you don't want, as a, let's say, employee, you don't want access to HR data, but the HR user should have HR data information. So how do you go about this? As I said, most databases have kind of settled on this roles and privileges concept, but the architecture, as in the way they do it, is different. There's always these little quirks. And inevitably, you're going to work with Postgres, you have to know those quirks, and you're going to work with Mongo, you're going to have to work with those quirks. So there's always little details that are different. So when I say architecture, again, if somebody said, oh, we have two houses, both of them are 3 bedrooms, 1,000 square foot. Are they the same house? No, I don't know how they designed it. Maybe the bedroom, maybe somebody put the washroom, the toilet in the kitchen. It's terrible architecture, right? But it's the same. So, as I said, the way they go about it is a little bit. So, everything that I'm going to say here is going to be specific to Postgres. We're going to move on to MongoDB and then Oracle and all that, and there's slight differences. And then we emphasize them. Some of the databases have really interesting things that none of the other databases have. The architects design some stuff, the engineers design some stuff, but the concept of roles and privileges will be the same. So just remember that. That's really the a major part of the course is how roles and privileges. Okay, so let's take a look here. So specifically with Postgres, they call the server, I mean, you have to have a database with a server, they call it a cluster, right? It's a bad name, that's why I keep seeing the word cluster. I mean, so the cluster you can have roles in your database, in your server, and you have databases, obviously, where the tables are, and obviously, the functions and triggers and so on. So, the way it works in Postgres is interesting. You cannot connect to a server without a database plus a role. You always need a database and a role. A role is kind of like the user, you can think of it. The user can log in, possibly, but it has to log into a database. So that's the way they architecture. Other databases are a little different. Other databases say, okay, well, you're a user, okay, you can log in to the server. Okay, you're in there. And then we'll decide what you want to do. Do you want to log into this database? Do you want to check this database? Whatever. Postgres is funny. Postgres is a no. If you want to connect a Postgres server, by the way, have you guys done Postgres in your previous course? Nobody? Pretty popular, right? I think it's the #1 SQL database right now. Anyways, Postgres is a little different. You log in to a database. And you'll see, and then by default, when we're going to set it up on the cloud creates a database for you. What do you think? What do they call the database? Postgres. So by default, you get a Postgres database, and then you also get a user. It's also called Postgres. So anyways, you'll see that this is a little funny, a little different, because other databases, this is okay, you do need a user, but, or role, again, we use the word role, you see, as a user. But other databases, they say, well, you don't need a database, just log into the server, that's it. So here is a little different. Okay, so that's the one we mentioned. And then these roles grant these, basically are responsible for everything on how or who can access the database. And it gets a little confusing because they have a couple of things associated with them. With the roles, we have privileges. So these are violent objects. What does that mean? What does object mean? Anything, yeah, tables, stuff. And then this one, we have attributes. These apply to whole cluster, whole server cluster. So, for example, we'll see in a second, a role could possibly not be able to log in. Log in, whether you can log in or not, is an attribute. Um, what else? A role may not be able to uh, connect to any database. So there's a bunch of what we call server level attributes. Then we have some actual then privileges, again, part of the role. And again, this makes it confusing sometimes for people. So we have two different things. All makes a little bit better sense when you do the hands-on part of this. All right, let's take a look. So roles, as we said, the word role is used these days. So other databases sometimes there's a concept of user and group. We'll see what the difference is. Um, User is someone that has a password and can log in. What's a group? It's just has privileges, and users can belong to groups. It is very commonly done, and you see it in you see it everywhere. This concept, you see it in operating systems, right? You're a user. What groups do you belong to? Oh, you're an admin group. Okay, you can do a lot of things in admin group. You're a user, but you belong to the developer group. The developer group has these privileges. So a lot of databases use this concept of user and group, and they specifically will call the users and groups. Postgres has moved away; they call them roles. Just call them roles. So a role that can log in is a user. A role that cannot log in is a group. So, all right. So anyways, these roles own database objects. They have those attributes, as we said, and then they have the privileges. And they can grant privileges to other people. So if someone owns a table, says, okay, well, I want this other guy to be able to access it, you can grant it. And that's really how it can be roles. You can basically apply security on what people do. Now, you guys have used other databases, right? Which database have you used? Oracle. And did you do any roles and privileges? No, super user, right? No. Everything can do, right? So that's the whole point of the here. We don't want to, life is not super user, although you see still a lot of people just super user. The idea is that, okay, we want to think about, what kind of people we have in the organization, what roles or what level of access should we give to them, right? That's really what the most important part of security is. So let's take a look here. As I said, Postgres used to have the concept of user and group. They moved away from this, right? So you could have done this. You could have created a user, you could have created a group. Well, you can still do it. Everything is backward compatible, but we just want to use the word role. So a role that has a password is a user role. A role that does not have a password is a group. As you see with MongoDB, the next rule on MongoDB literally says you can groups of users. There's no difference. This is what we mean by anytime you kind of work with these stuff, is these little caveats. Okay, so let's look at the attribute. As I said, these are the cluster level stuff, right? So what are the cluster level stuff? Well, by default, anytime you create a role, you can specify can you log in or not. Right. Obviously, right? You can log in or not. So if you add the password, then that means that they can log in. If you don't add the password, then that means they cannot log in. Okay, what else? Super user. Super user as an attribute. What do you think this means? This basically can do anything. You can allow this. Can they create roles within the database, within the server? Can they create databases? Do they have required passwords? So if they have a password, that means they're a user, it's not their group. And most importantly, can they inherit? Right? What does this mean? We'll see in a second. The key thing to role management in any kind of database is that we like to create one of these hierarchies. Right? Here's admin group. admin group can do certain things, this guy belongs to that admin group, so he can do certain things, right? And this guy maybe belongs to another group and so on. So we like this hierarchy, and inherit just means that, okay, if I'm part of this group, can I inherit the privilege that this group has? And the answer, if you have this attribute, is yes. By default, when you create a role, it does have the inherit. So there's some default values. You don't necessarily need to say inherit with inherit, but you could, just to be explicit. And then the rest of it, later. It doesn't really matter. Okay, so as we said, Postgres. Okay, okay, so Postgres is funny. As I said, Postgres. Well, all databases have to allow you. I mean, every database, at the end of the day, is going to log into the database, is a user. So what do most databases do by default? They give you a super user, right? I mean, that's every database does this. Whether you're dealing with Oracle, anything else other than Oracle that you guys did? MySQL, anything else?
Yes, sir.
Else? No. That's what. So I got any database. At the end of the day, when you create a database, great, you need a user. You need a user. It's the super. Right? And most people, when they're learning about databases, blah blah blah, super users, like everything's working good. The problem here is when you get to security, super user is a problem. Generally now, again, security always a good area to be in. No one cares about security. So as I said, it's been like 20 years, this field. It's not that old, very young, kind of good. And so, people have kind of soured on the super user. So when you think of the super user like this, but in reality, it's like this. What is this? Does anyone know what this is from?
The Lord of the Rings.
Yeah, Lord of the Rings. This is Sauron. The Lord of the Rings. This is the evil. It never has a face. So the problem with super user, literally, if you're a super user, you go to the database and delete everything. So again, who knows? You give it a co-op and access, delete it. It's a problem, right? So databases are coming off of the super user role, right? And this is true everywhere. So super user can do anything, can see anything, can do everything. So generally, you can avoid it. You have to have a super user. They always give you a super user to start. But then the idea is that after you have a super user, by default it's created, it's called Postgres. Everything, you can do anything you want. There's no check or balances on it. As long as you have the login password correct, you're good to go. So there's nothing to do. But as I said, in the last 20, 25 years, database has been around for 40, 50 years. People are kind of soured on this a little bit, and they say that, okay, you should have a super user like user. Don't use the super user, use that super user that you get to create another role, create another user, call it admin, and give a few of the attributes. Obviously not super user. Give obviously login, but usually you want to get create role and create database. And sometimes we just want to. So now this guy can create roles, create databases, and everything. So again, literally, the way they do it, any database does it the same. Literally, I mean, database and database code, you have to see. So if you delete table, okay? So if you go back to the code, you might say, if, okay. So how do I delete table? Well, let me check, should I delete the table? It might be like if super user or, let me check. Delete. Right. That's it. So literally every line of code has is it the super user? No problem. Right. Literally, that's how super user works. Literally, it's embedded in the code that people wrote. Database, and then they write a code. What happens behind the scenes is a code. real code that runs. I mean, that's why people love data. I mean, SQL came out when? In the 80s, 70s, 80s? So people love this. Oh, makes no sense, right? But really, what then happens behind the scenes, this is transferred to, somebody wrote the code to actually do this, the actual code. We don't see it, but that's the code, right? And database engineers, what do? They really optimize this code. How do I write it really optimized so I can get the values quickly? So anyways, in the code, when it comes to security, literally, every time you're supposed to do something, they just say, okay, the super user, do it all. So anyways, that's one thing we would like to do. So, and that applies to every database, we like this super user like. The other thing is, so now, let's super user like. Okay, let me look at this. So this is very specific to Postgres, again, architecture, right? People do things differently. So, as we said, by default, if you create a role, do you get an inherit or not? If I say create a role, let's see, if I had one. Let's say I do create a role and don't put inherit. Do I get inherit privileges or not? I said it. Yes, right? I said yes. You don't have to say inherit. Anyway, so that means it can inherit from roles, other roles. Every role is given then is part of public. So literally, if you want to think about it, there's a role called public. There's a role called public. And you create a role, as long as you don't say no inherit, there's no inherit, that is part of the public. And this public guy has three attributes: connect, usage template, sorry, not attributes, three privileges. Connect, usage template, execute. So what does that mean? That means that anything that every role by default has these because it's part of public. So if I'm a part of public, I have public privileges. These are the privileges. The problem is, so one thing is, okay, so we'll talk about privileges. So everybody has access to public, and then you're allowed to connect usage template. So what do these privileges mean? We'll see in a second. These are the privileges. Now, again, this was been done, and again, this is in Postgres, this is and others do something similar. We kind of soured on this as well, right? And we're like, why should by default a role get any privileges? I mean, it doesn't make sense. Is the user even aware that this role now that they created has these privileges? Okay. Now, again, 20 years, we went, don't give anything without being explicit about it. Be explicit about what you want to give access to. Don't just give access for free. So it's recommended that you get rid of these privileges. Okay. Now, again, key thing to understand, we'll see that in a second what privileges. There's a select privilege. What do you think this does? Sorry? Yeah, so select on a table. That's all about selecting on a table. Right? But what about select on a database? Can I do that? Awesome. Right? So you'll see that, again, it gets a little confusing. Postgres has these privileges. Privileges are just basically what you can do, but it depends on the database object. What kind of objects do we have?
Stop being on a fuck.
You know, you have a few objects. Let's say at the beginning. Schema, yes. Anything else? Okay, no problem, table. Database. Anything else? Functions and everything. Now, did you guys do functions, trigger stuff? Not part of this course, but yeah. So the idea is that if you have like a, let's say, usage privilege, it has different meanings for schema, for table, for database. It's just one thing, but they have one privilege name, but it does different things depending on what you apply. If you say I have usage on a table, that's different from a usage on a database. Sometimes some of these don't apply to everything. Usage may not apply to, let's say, functions. So again, this is part of these kind of nitty-gritty details that you see with these kind of stuff. Postgres, as I said, is a very popular database. Let's see how popular is Postgres. So you guys never did any Postgres? Postgres. Yeah, in 2020, it was the most popular database system in global stack overflow. And it's really indicative of almost more than he has a big market. Let's see. So here it's just sports, it's sport. Look, it is Postgres. As I said, we do Postgres, we do MongoDB, we do MySQL work. But as I said, there is quirks here and there. Chances are, I'm not a survivor in Postgres. Chances are you'll see Postgres. Okay, so let's go back here. So as I said, you all have access to public. Now, as I said, we've kind of soured on these kind of, oh, you by default you get access to this. We've kind of soured on that. So it's recommended that you revoke all those access on the schema and the database. So it says revoke all privileges that are on this on the schema public from public, and then revoke all the any privileges that you have on any database from public. And then you manually then add them. Okay. Okay, so we kind of hinted at these privileges. We kind of had to talk about them a little bit because of public. So what is privilege? So it's like, okay, I'm an authorized user, I logged in. What am I allowed to do? Now, strictly speaking, as I said, with Postgres, you can't log into the server. There's no such thing. With Postgres, you have to log into the database. So you always have to log into one database. That's why it gives you a Postgres user, who's a super user, and a Postgres database. Sometimes people don't, sometimes people gotta start creating databases. So here's the concept when it comes to privileges. I mean, this is how I've been accepted. Just like the security is able to mount multiple barriers, barrier after barrier, because somebody's going to crack through. When it comes to the roles and privileges, it makes sense. Provide the least amount of access by default. And every role should be given explicit access, so you know what you do. And then the databases are kind of on this principle. So the way they architected their design is to have the principle of this. Okay. So what are the privileges then? The set of access to the database and database objects. You do it with a grant and you revoke it with a revoke. Here are the privileges. Select, insert, update, delete, truncate. Now, the ones that are highlighted here, what are these? Why did I highlight these?
When there is a public,
Yes, somebody doesn't. Okay, yes, the public, right? Public, when you create a role, you gotta belong to public, and public by default has this. The rest of this, as I said, is object dependent. Okay, obviously select on a table makes sense, right? Can I see the roles? But what's select on a schema? What's select on a database? You gotta read the documentation. We'll look at that a little bit. So obviously insert in a table makes sense, right? But is there insert for a database? Is there insert for schema? Update makes sense. Maybe for a lot of them. Delete, well, that kind of works for all of them, right? Delete a database, delete a table, delete a schema. So, but as I said, these are the privileges, but they may apply differently, and they not apply to every object. Right? The concept of update doesn't exist for it. Okay. Maybe that's good. So now here's an example of how we get granted. So we're going to say grant create on a database. This database, AppDBs on database. So someone created it. To admin one. What does this mean? We are admin one is a role. We are saying that they can create on this database. What does that mean? Usually this creates tables and schema. But again, you have to look this up. What does create on a database mean? We'll take a look at it next class. Grant usage create a schema app to Dev1. Now Dev1 can do create on this schema app. So again, what does that mean? Usage on means usually for a schema usage means okay, you can see the table. Everybody knows what a schema is?
Like how the data will be available.
Yeah, usually we don't like one fat database. We want to say, okay, this is the tables related to HR, these are the tables related to students. So we create these schemas. A lot of people don't. They just have all the huge tables. So usage usually means can you actually see the tables, but not necessarily select on the tables. So then you have to grant select, and all tables in schema. I think I misspoke. I think usage. Oh, you might actually just see the schema. Select is when you actually see the tables, and then you have to have select on a table to actually be able to select the role of the table. Okay. Now, so let's say here's the idea. So yeah, this is important. Again, grants are only at the time. So grant all tables in schema public to Dev1. So let's say there's a bunch of tables in public. By the way, Postgres by default comes with the public. The schema comes with the public schema. So we grant everything. We can do anything on the tables. Great. Later on, there's a new table created in public. That new table is not allowed all access. So only at this time frame, you get all access. Everything else after this, let's say create a new table now, the new table is public, doesn't mean that they'll want to have access. Is that a good thing? Not to say sorry. So that's what we mean by architecture. That's how they designed it. The smart engineer doesn't say, you know what? Only when you apply grant, that's it. At that time, whatever tables you have, I'll do grant. After that, no. You create new tables, no. You gotta do another allow. So this is again, you can kind of, if you think about it, maybe it makes sense, and I would say, yeah. I mean, maybe the new user doesn't realize. If you think about it, maybe we have a new employee, and then creates a very sensitive data, right? And thinks that that's nobody has access to. Whereas if you had an architecture where if you apply this, all throughout the history, everyone has access to those tables. You kind of see how we get into trouble. So I mean, yeah, sometimes, and then you'll see, eventually, you guys in your careers, you'll get to a point where you'll be like, you'll be sorry enough, experienced enough, and be like, what a stupid architecture. you'll argue with people. But that's how they designed it. They said that if you grant, it's only at that time. Anything after that, you gotta re-grant. Anyways, as I said, you gotta, when you grant, for example, select, what does it do? It is in this documentation. We'll look at this next week. Okay. Okay, so we're kind of understand the roles and the privileges and the attributes, which are at server level. Now, we've talked about inheritance, but this is really the best way, we kind of agree, is now to organize your roles and privileges. Okay? So roles can be granted membership into another role. Again, Postgres uses the word role interchangeably. If you like, it's a user role, group role. If a role has an inherit set, they automatically have usage privileges from member roles. The preferred method is using group privileges. So here's an example of what we might do, and we'll do this in the hands-on. So I'm going to create an admin. It doesn't log in, it doesn't inherit. I'm going to grant insert update delete on all tables in the schema app to admin. I have to do this as a super user. So now admin and insert update. I'm going to create a role called report only privilege. I'm going to grant select on this report privilege. And then I'm going to grant admin report only privilege to the senior developer. And I'm going to grant report only privilege to report user. So this is the way we like to do things. Think about all the different things that your users can do and put them in essentially groups. Right? So we have created essentially a group called report only privilege. We have created a group called admin. These are groups. We gave senior developer, report senior developer in these two groups. So now senior developer can do these things. But we have given a report user only access to this guy, so he can only do something. So anytime you want to do roles and privileges, you generally like to create a diagram like this. Right? You want to have groups. And then we want to have, these are the users. Users belong to groups. Make sense? You like to categorize it. 90% of people, what do they do? You pick these all over. It's kind of lazy way of doing things, right? Hey, I'm sitting in a startup, I'll go in, I'll go back. The whole database is super user, one user, super user. Works, then we start getting bigger. Once you have found the user, you need to start seeing which users are active, for example, which are not. Well, there are very common developers, I don't want to give this guy access to how much money is making. That table with the subscription. So, as I said, people get lazy usually, super user. People are like, oh, there's another user, I'm going to continue for this. So we like to have this kind of set. So again, assume role 1 is granted privilege on object A. Assume role 4 inherits from role 1 as it's part of the group. Then role 2 also gets same privilege on object. So this is the setup we like to use, but we're going to go into more detail. And then, again, we spent a little bit more time with Postgres, but I think it's a useful database first of all. Second of all, the stuff we do here, then you just translate for everything else. So when you do MongoDB, you don't do as much. The syntax is a little bit. That's it. Okay, any questions on that, guys? Okay, But so lastly here, this is best understood with hands-on, which I'm gonna do in a second. Okay. Here's the problem with all this stuff, okay? Let's say you're an object, you're a role, you're logged in as your user. You create an object because you're allowed that. In some schema, you create the object. You now own that object. You're the super user of it. Okay. What does that mean? You can do whatever you want with it, delete, update, whatever. You're the owner. Now, remember this principle of these privileges, right? The owner owns it. Nobody else owns anything. So unless specifically granted ahead of time, objects are owned and accessible by the creator. So this creates a really funny situation. Okay, again, let's look at this hierarchy. Okay? R1, R2. There's a table 1 in R2. Okay? Let's say we're the super user or super user like. We say, let me ask you, so we say grant,
The grams.
select on E1 to R2. This is not the right, this is not the right, what do you have? Right syntax. You're never tested on syntax. You might get a piece of code and ask, what does this do? So grant select on P1. Now, question, can R1 select on P1? Yes, that's the whole point. Now here's the second. As R2, create P2. Put it in. Question. Can R1 select on P2? And the answer is no. Right?
Because the grant is less single, but the grant is.
Yeah, because you own it. Who created T2? R2. And only R2 now has access to it. You want to say, well, what about T1? T1 was owned by somebody else, some super user then gave select access on that to R2. And then by default, R1 got it as well. Because R1 is, it's part of the same. So again, we'll go over this a bit more, but this is why it gets a little confusing, right? R2 was created by T2 was created by R2, by the principle of its privileges. T2 belongs to R2, nobody else has any access. Even if you're in the same group, there's no one in the same group. So that's the problem, because so what can be done? Well, literally, R2 has to then say, okay, after they created it, they have to say, grant, select, on R2, on T2 to R1. Literally, yeah. So as long as you realize that, then you're okay. So why do they do it like this? Is the principle of these privileges. If you create a new object, you should not assume anything by default. Because a new object is owned by the owner, and that's it. The owner has to explicitly apply ownership, or any type of privilege to other objects. Right? Now, again, if there is an existing table and the super user grants access to R2, then yes. But the owner will, again, what about this table one? Well, table one likely originally was only created by super user. And the super user went and said, okay, grant select R2 onto R2. So no matter what, every object has an owner. And at some stage, that owner had to give access to that role. And if there's any roles that are inherent from the other role, as in there's some part of the group, then they will get access as well. But there's no automatic access. Just because as soon as you create a table doesn't mean that you're already, even though people that are part of the group will have access. Okay, so we'll go over that a little bit more. Now this gets annoying though. If you remember, we were kind of saying this gets annoying. Remember, security is only useful until this becomes too annoying. When it becomes too annoying, then no one likes it. So people don't really like this. They're like, oh man, why can't, you know what? I already gave R1 access to R2. Why can't you make T2 also accessible? If I made R1 be part of R2. It's not done like that. But there is ways around. Okay. So you might say, I don't like this architecture. Yes, there's ways around it. So how can I do it? There's default privileges. So as a role, you have default privilege. Okay. Every role has default privilege. What does that mean? It means that, okay, when I create an object, who can access, what do other people have access to? Right? And you might say, okay, well, my default privilege is any table that I own has select access. So you can certainly do that. In that case, you don't need to explicitly create. But I mean, it's a debatable whether you want, should you kind of alter this default privilege, or should you actually just explicitly grant it? That always works. But we'll see. We'll see. There's 3 different options that we'll look at. So we'll continue on this next week, as I said, but we're going to do a little bit of hands-on, and probably you can argue Postgres is one of the most abstract role privilege concepts. Okay, so let's take a 10-minute break here. We're going to come back, and we're going to create our Postgres database on the cloud. Okay. So get your AWS up and running. We're going to create on the cloud, log into it. So 10-minute break.
Wash on for you 6.
அக்கௌண்ட் -225 இப்போ ஆச்சுன்னா தெரியும் அந்த பதினெட்டுல எனக்கு எண்டில் தான் இருக்கும் ஃப்ரைடே அனுப்புகிறாங்க அனுப்பிடுறாங்க நான் காசுல தான் அனுப்புகிறேன்
போ
$5 $1 அனுப்புகிறேன் சேலரி வரலாம் அனுப்புகிறேன்
ஓகே Oh shit.
கொடுத்துட்டாங்க
யாரு
மத்திய
225
இந்த 58 இருக்கு ஹலோ பேபி அம்மா அதான் உங்ககிட்ட கார்டு இருக்கா எங்க இருக்கு இந்த பிரேக் எனக்கு நகை போட்டுமா கஷ்டம்
It's look at the shots. I ain't gonna fucking do anything else. Relax, motherfucker. Hey. It's just close about
Yeah, looks like 10%. I get it. We will, very likely it will be 10%. So what I have to do is I have to take a poll. I gotta ask the management if it's okay, then I will take a poll. If 2/3 of the class vote to change. Everyone's okay?
Yeah. This assignment deserve only 20%. Still updated.
Easy.
Note that.
It's like, oh my
So
God.
yeah, the assignment is likely gonna be worth 10%. It's gonna be taken off your midterm exam funds.
So what about?
So midterm, did we decide before the break or after the break?
Before the. What should we do?
Slowly.
So all MCQs are from scratch.
Or the lecture or something I said. So before the break, everybody agreed on before the break?
Yeah.
Oh man.
Okay, so let's do a hand. Let's set this up. Okay, so everybody's logged into their account. Okay, so I'll give you a few minutes here, guys. So we're going to create a Postgres database on the cloud, right? We could download it individually. Postgres is actually pretty good, but we just want to go on the cloud. So everybody not have access to AWS still? Everyone has access? Okay. So just log in. Obviously. So let's take a look at how we're going to do this. So we're going to just create a Postgres database on the cloud. As we said, we're going to try to do everything on the cloud here. The reason for it is to say everyone's on the same page. Nobody can say, "Oh, my computer doesn't work." Sometimes when we do Windows, Mac, different Windows operating system, different hardware, every people have trouble, right? So again, as I said, everything is on the data on the cloud. So, so as with everything on the cloud, so you log in, we're going to search for RDS. Okay, and you'll see this Aurora and RDS. RDS stands for Relational Database Service. It's basically a service from AWS that allows you to create a relational database. Yeah, relational database is a database of VM plus installed software, but they install it for you, and they can pay a little bit of money. So I'm going to go there. You can see there. I have no databases right now. I'm going to create a database. So again, just search for RDS. I'll run an RDS and then create a database. Okay, so here we are. Now, unfortunately, we cannot create Oracle and some of the other databases. Postgres we can. But, with the free account that you have here, you cannot do everything. Well, that's okay. As you'll see with the Oracle, we'll just install it ourselves on VM. I have a script to just install it. But Postgres we can. So I'm going to choose Postgres here. We're going to keep it as standard create. So you can see that the version, right now we're in version 17 of Postgres, version 18 is coming later this year. So here it says, okay, what do you want? Do you want a production? Do you want a dev test environment? Or do you want a free tier? We'll just put on the free tier. Again, databases, you'll notice you have $50 credit. Not a big deal if you run out of credit. How much credit do people have right now?
49.
Okay, so you use $1. Yeah. So yeah, you should be okay, but if you ever need, I can always give you a second account. But anyways, we want the free tier here because databases usually cost a bit of money. Again, we're going to shut it down now. So we do free tier, we'll choose this one, no problem. It says what do you want to call it? This is supposed to be whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. This is the super user. As I said, Postgres by default is a super user called Postgres. You can change it if you like. There's no need for us to change it. We'll keep it at that. And we need a password, right? So they do want you to have a strong password. The capital, number, special character. So I think they need up to strong is okay. Though that they give me an error, I believe. So I'll just wait there for a second.
Fucking shit.
Oh, everyone's okay so far? So now I'm going to continue. We'll leave this. This says the medius this conversation also goes already.
That's really
Storage, 20 gigs should be more than enough.
be done.
You can see that some kind of auto scaling, so you can actually increase an output a terabyte. Okay, sure. Um, okay, so it says network IPv4. Yes. That's fine. Which VPC you want? Again, maybe you're working on your assignment, but I believe I didn't ask for new VPC, but that's the default VPC. Okay, so the subnet group, right now it's on default. Okay. So remember, we can add more access later, right? So right now, I'll just leave it at that. Either you want to change it to public, obviously you want to have access to this. Something your database is just only has a private address. So the only thing to change will put it to public. Now the security group is the low. Like everything in Postgres, anything, any resource on the cloud,
Oh, the
you have to have a
stupid
firewall.
shit.
You guys
Fucking,
are experts in
fucking.
security groups now, right? So we're gonna create a new one for this guy, sure. So we're gonna create a new one, that's called the Postgres, firewall. What do you like? Yeah, there's a default launchers and one launchers and two. So we may have a few of them, but as I said. So we're gonna kind of stack these, but, so let's do a new one, as I said, let's create a new one. Let's call it Postgres, and then we're gonna add our, add necessary, necessary security layer. This is which availability zone you want to create it, we say no preference. RDX proxy, that's pretty good. The only thing we change, we make the public, we say create a new one, and we're just going to create it, there's going to be nothing there, we have to kind of modify it. And anything else we did? No. Or you can save somebody, disable it, that means you just have a password. So don't forget your password, right? Oh, so we're good to go? And we're going to launch. And again, this will take a few minutes. There you go. The arrows. So we'll talk about a few minutes here. Please talk about yourself. Let's take a couple of minutes here, just wait a few minutes. Okay, so let's take a look again. Okay, so there you go, it's available now. Okay, so as a sanity check, just make sure you're clicking on this, and you should have. So there's our security group right now, which there's nothing in there right now. We just created it. You click on this. Well, actually, there isn't a download. So by default, apparently, that's good. They allow you to access port 5.32. Does anyone know what's special about 5.32? That's the Postgres port. So this should be my IP address. This should be any different. So by default, it seems that they did this, and outbound should be everything as we see. Okay, so again, that's the security group. Back to IDS. So there it is. This is my database. Okay, now we need to connect to this database, obviously. How can I connect to it? Well, you have to have some third-party connectivity, and that's what we're going to look at here. So again, there is an endpoint, as in IP address. This is a DNS address, but there is, we know the IP address of this, and we know this is the port where we can access the server. But how do we access it? We need a third-party too. So normally, you guys are used to, I assume, downloading Postgres as its own graphical interface, Oracle, and all that. But there's also third-party tools. So we're going to install a third-party tool. Okay, so I'm just doing a new recording here. Okay, so to log in, we need third-party tools. Does anybody use any third-party tools to log in to Postgres? Okay, have you heard of Beaver? Has anybody used it anywhere? So these are tools, they're not databases, they're tools that give you a graphical interface to any database. So we're going to download Beaver, it's very popular. There's other ones, there's Table Plus, there's a bunch of them. So we're going to do, let's PDR. There you go. The database and admin is easy. But as I said, we're going to do dbeaver. Let's download dbeaver. So they should have dbeaver. So we're just going to do, I guess, a light here. It should be free.
Super shit.
And there goes Windows, Mac, and download. I just search for dbeaver and then download. So the link here is dbeaver.com/download. Beaver. I'm going to do the light one. I'm just going to download, and it kind of depends on how Windows. Sure, I'm going to do the Windows installer. So you guys, whatever you have. So let's see. And we have Peter. Waiting. Oh, there you go. Sorry. Still downloading?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. No, I installed it. Oh, you know it yourself, yes. Okay, so it seems like they want a license now. There. It was free download, what happened? Yeah, so sorry about this. I think I made a mistake here. Just got a community version. What happened? Maybe Deep Eater has gone the ways of where is it? We used to have a community. Community. So these guys. So Deep Eater. Yeah, where's the open up one? Sorry, Yahoo.com where? IO?
Okay.
Huh. Oh. Sorry, that's the one. Okay, so my bad. Community version. That was the paid version. Cancel.
Yeah,
Okay, so just so it's clear, so as I said, there's a lot of these tools available. We want to log into our database here, but we don't have a UI, and there's these tools available. One of them is dbviewer. So you want to go to dbviewer.io/download this. And we want to download the community version. There it is. Download the installer. So this tool allows us to get a graphical interface to the database. So again, remember, our server is the engine. We have the engine in the back end. And we want a UI. So again, usually, so that it displays the data nicely and so on. Usually, database vendors give you at least a kind of command line interface. But you can also use these UIs, and the database and engines also sometimes the vendors give you the UI as well. But nobody says they can't use this third party. That's what we're doing here, because we don't have a UI, everybody. So, there we go on. Alright, so there we go. Here we are. And we're gonna log in a second. Let's wait for you guys. Is Rory still downloading? Yes. Oh, everyone's okay? Anyone having any trouble with this? Okay, so we want to continue?
Yep.
Okay, so let's see how we can connect to this. So you'll see here, on the top left here, there'll be a kind of a plug. We're gonna click on that. And we're gonna choose Postgres. So then, goes a plug. Postgres. Next, and you get to a page like this. So for the host, obviously the postgres is not running. This is the address. It's not running locally. Where is it? We're going to go here and copy this endpoint. Okay. Copy that endpoint and come back and paste it here. So as I said, Postgres always needs a database to connect to. That's not the case with other databases. And all this needs a user and a password. So by default, there always will be a Postgres database created. When you create it, and then the username, remember we kept it at Postgres, we could have changed it. And that's the password here. That you chose when you created it. Okay, so everyone ready? So before we connect, we're going to do a test connection just to see if it's working. And it's telling me, hey, I need to download a bunch of drivers. These are JDBC drivers. Sure, download. And I got. That's good. Yes, so that's good. So that means my obviously password was correct, and again, we didn't need to do anything, but if you remember, the firewall that we created a new one, AWS helped us out, and by default added our IP address. If you're doing this at home, obviously you may need to edit this and add another IP address. Postgres by default, as you can see there, is using port 5432. And so again, my IP address today in college is that. Again, if you go home, obviously the IP address can change. You probably don't want to do 0.0.0/0. Not a big deal, but there's bots out there these days that look for any unsecure and secure information. Well, are you sure the password is correct?
Yeah.
And you are sure that you got, let's just make sure you got the endpoint correct?
Yes.
Nobody was able to log in? One person? Good. That was one person. Are you sure? Double check. I mean, the only thing I can see is the password being wrong. There's no other way. I mean, the other thing you can do is the security group, you can put 0.0.0/0. But, I mean, I don't. No, you have to know what you're doing. I was just trying to tell people, if you're going at home, your home IP address will not be the same. So, how do you still cannot connect? Connected? Okay, so let me double check here. Are you sure that, for example, let's go to the security group. So here's your database. You have the security? Okay, why don't you go there and click on it, and then what, do you see this there? Do you see our IP address as added? Okay, let's, as a sanity check, let's delete this and add 0.0.0. Edit the inbound and just allow everyone. So it could be the Wi-Fi, maybe they switch IP address on you. Dynamically. So let's just allow everyone access. I mean, I don't, so let's just allow everyone access. Yeah, so again, if you go to your database has a security group. Your here we go, here's the databases, this is the database, this is the security group. Click on it, and then you'll go to another page, this is, here it is, click on that, and you'll come to the details, you can say edit inbound. Edit the inbound, and as I said, by default, Postgres just chose your IP address. I would say add, just do 0.0.0.0, just to confirm that's not the issue, and save it. And once you have it saved, try again. And if that doesn't work, I would say it's your password. I don't see any other reason. It's the password that you created. Are you sure? Oh. Okay, try this. Does it work? You did 0.0.0/0. I don't see a reason. Did you? This is you put your own host?
So the database name should be the same.
Yeah, everybody, again, Postgres, when it creates a data, Postgres, when it's set up, it creates a database called Postgres. That's always the same. Okay, let me see. Maybe you stepped in this. Okay, let's go back. How many people cannot log in? Yes, cannot. Okay, this. Anybody on this side cannot log in? Anybody on this side is in the phone? Anybody log in? You guys log in? Let me come over here. Let me do an audit here. Okay, almost logged into AWS Academy. This is cricket. Yeah. You guys are logged in? Okay, all right. No endpoint. Okay, let me see. What does it say? Are you using URL? Just be host. It's host. Host. We're using host. Okay, so test. What does it fail? Wrong application failed. Okay, say okay. Why is Postgres DB? Why did you change it? No. Right. Again, if you remember today, when you Postgres, you install it, it's your user and a database. What's the name of the user? Postgres. What's the database? Postgres. That's just my name of my database instance. This should be Postgres for everybody. This should be Postgres for everybody.
Yeah, for me it is good.
Okay. Oh, there was a firewall issue? Okay, so you say okay.
For me, it's saying it's time up.
The host.
என்ன பண்ணணும்?
It's kind of surprising.
லேப்டாப்
Okay.
ஆஃப் ஆச்சு சொல்லுது.
So you had a firewall issue.
And
But it came out of the way. Yeah, I don't see a reason. Did it work? Yours work? Any of you guys are trying? Did anybody work here? Does it work? You log in? You do test connection, what happens? It doesn't matter. I mean, I don't know why. It doesn't work. Something?
Professor,
Yeah. Okay, so
Professor, can you delete the previous RDS and create a new one and put it?
yeah, you can. Just takes a bit of time. You just leave it there, it's- So are you sure you guys remember your password? The caps lock wasn't on? I don't know. I lost. Okay, so let's try another one. Okay, here's an idea. Let's try another one. So I'm gonna try table plus. How's that? Table plus. Table plus is ED. There you go. So table plus is another one of these we can use. For table plus,
Yeah.
this should be okay. Dot com. Okay, so let's take a look here. I'm gonna say plus connection Postgres. And go DB. The host would be. Again, I'm gonna put this security. I'm gonna put my endpoint there. Copy. Port 5432. User Postgres. Database. Password. that the connection is okay. So there's another way that you connect. So you put the endpoint port, push this, and so you can also connect with this guy. Now, if you can't connect, again, I don't see a reason. I can only think maybe the public Wi-Fi here is having trouble. But I don't know, some people have access, right? My gut feeling is that probably you forgot your password. So no problem, you can watch and then you can do this later. So again, this is a way to do it as well, and then we can connect.
With the name, host and connect.
Yeah, just test. So this is, this is another way, Table Plus. I'm gonna use DB. Okay. Okay, still you guys have trouble? All right, leave it for now. As I said, I'm gonna do the hands-on and then we'll pick it up next week, right? We'll see. I would suggest you guys delete the database, create it again, get a new one, and see what's going on. My gut feeling is something wrong. It's not a big deal. Okay, so now that I'm sure the test works, I'm gonna use eDealer, I'm gonna finish, and there we go. So you can see that, again, Postgres always comes with a Postgres database, and so on. Now, what we're gonna do is we're gonna go to SQL editor, new, open SQL script. There we go. SQL editor. Open SQL script. New SQL script.
எனக்கு அந்த ப்ராஜெக்ட் நேம் சொல்லுவேன் தெரியுமா?
என்ன வேணும்?
அடுத்த கிளாஸ்.
அடுத்த கிளாஸ் தானே. நீ அட்டன் பண்றியா?
Everyone has that, with the people that have it? Now, I'm gonna, and this is just like to run your queries. Now, by default, and this is kind of annoying, I like SQL queries to be uppercase. And you can see by default, it just turns them all to lowercase. That's an eyesore, I don't like that. So I'm gonna go to Windows, Preferences. Look at Windows, Preferences. For the login, right? Yeah, I think again, if you're gonna log in, I'm gonna just move on. My suggestion is to create another database. I don't see a reason for it, but anyway.
the secured carbon காமிச்சதுல எனக்கு செக்யூர் கார்டு காமிச்சதுல எனக்கு திரும்ப
Okay, so I'm
இன்னொரு
gonna
அக்கௌண்ட்
continue here.
கிரியேட் அது 1000 லிமிட் கொடுத்துட்டாங்க.
இல்லையா?
So again, I'm gonna say go to editors. So you're gonna go down to editors, code completion, and instead of default, we're gonna use uppercase. Okay. So I don't think I have enough time to go through it. So yeah, what happens is that if you try to type some query, you'll see that it always makes a lowercase. So I want to make it complex. So I went to Windows Preferences, right? Go to Editor,